Hey YouTube, this is Trueshot Technologies. We're doing a installation video on a see-through scope mount we made for Mosin hex receivers. And I'm going to show you something you're going to have to do to make our mount work on this hex receiver. But I'm also going to show you some advantages of the mount itself. When we designed this mount, it was originally going to be made for the round receiver only, and then we had several customers asking for a hex model. Unfortunately, that was after we already had the extrusion made for the base. This is an unpainted extrusion base. The extrusion made for the base of the mount. If you look here, these bases are going to be a completely precision machined hex to fit the hex on the rifle. You're going to have a tight fit all the way down even to this lug, which has a 16-degree angle on the side of it. The problem with this extrusion already being made was too low on this step for the hex receiver because of this lug. So what you're going to have to do to use our mount on this is grind the top of this little lug only, not this side, just this side, a 1/16 of an inch down. It's not going to be a big deal. There's several ways to do it, but in the end, when you get it down to where this will slide on, you're holding the mount down tight on the hex up in front, you're going to see that it's going to be a nice tight fit at the hex and at the 16-degree angle. This is a scrap piece. This is going to be a lot thicker here. That's why you have to grind this down. There's several ways to do this. You can use a bench grinder finished off with a file. You can use a Dremel. You can use a 4-inch angle grinder with a cutoff wheel. I'm going to grind this one down, and then when you're done grinding it, you can smooth it out with a file and sandpaper and re-glue it. And I'll show you what that looks like when I'm done here. Not a big deal. We figure since you're going to be drilling and tapping this mount anyway. Our round mount comes with the guide bar. This mount is machined to the hex, so there shouldn't be any issue. If you look down that mount, it's hard to tell with the camera probably, but you'll see that it's right in line with the rear sight. We're going to try the guide bar and see how that works too, just for double checking yourself. But once that mount is on the hex, it has nowhere to be but on center, because it's on machined precisely to the hex. So again, we're going to grind the top of this lug here where the stripper clip will go in, down 1/16 of an inch, the whole top surface area here. Before grinding it, put yourself a scribe mark. You can use calipers, you can use a scale. 1/16 of an inch, or 0.62, 0.60 is fine. This doesn't have to be precise. And also, take some shop towel, stuff it down in the bore and the rest of the receiver area to protect it from that grinding dust. And get it as flat and level on the grind as you can. Smooth it out, take your time smoothing it out, sand it down a little, and re-glue it. When it's done, it should look pretty nice. Should be hard to even tell it's been ground, but we'll show you in a minute here. Alright, that took me about 3 minutes on a bench grinder, just using the side of the wheel on the bench grinder. You can see now that when you put this base on, remember this is unpainted, now you get a tight fit all the way around the hex, all three sides, and you get a nice tight fit at that 16-degree angle. I actually took this down about 10 or 15 thousandths too low with the grinder, but it's not going to matter. When you put the side hole in, the side of the receiver, this is going to be every bit as solid as the round receiver is. Maybe even more so because it's seated at 3 places on that hex and back here on the 16 degrees. So again, we said We didn't think that customers would mind doing this since to their hex receiver Mosins, which are a little harder to find because you're going to drill and tap it anyway. This is easy to do. Like I said, I used the side of the bench grinder wheel. Just took my time and got it nice and straight. And I'll show it to you in a minute when it looks sanded down and blued. Alright, there's after just sanding it down a little bit, bluing it. I used this Birchwood KC Presto cold blue pen, gun blue pen. Works really good for small touch-up stuff. And you can see at a glance, I don't know how you've seen it in this camera view, but to me it actually looks better than this side. But it's just slightly lower. Like I said, a 1/16 lower, and it will allow the mount to slide on there with a real solid. It'll be good and solid when it's done. And that's what you need to do to use our see-through scope mount on a hex receiver Mosin. It took me about less than 10 minutes to do that. Grind it, sand a little bit, blew it, rub some oil on it. Alright, one last time, guys. After you grind down this 1/16 of an inch off this surface, you want to hold this down. Up front here, you want to make sure this section's flat on the hex. Slide it back. The 16 degrees should clear, and this should clear where you ground. If you're holding this down firm up front and sliding this thing back, you should not run into that hump you ground down. So take a little at a time. Use this as your test gauge. When you get it to the point where it'll slide over that without you seeing the part come up at all any, then you know you're good. If you've got a few thousandths under there clearance a little too far, that's not going to make any difference. When this is bolted 3 places, it's going to be extremely solid. So you're going to use the part for a gauge that way too. Okay guys, YouTube, this is the rest of the Trueshot Technologies Mosin nagant see-through scope mount for the hex receiver. To start with, I'm just showing you how I'm holding this. Real simple. I have a milling machine behind me and a drill press, but I want you guys to be able to do this at home if you can. That's just a piece of 2x4 with 3 different hole sizes drilled in it and then sawed down the middle. One that fits a barrel. This is just a piece of 2x4 with a square notch cut out of it and a little L bracket. You can put some screws into your bench there if you want, if you need to. I don't think I need to. Just letting you know how I'm holding the rifle before I start. Okay, we have the hex in our little makeshift setup here, the hex receiver Mosin. In the first section of the video, we told you to grind off a 1/16 of an inch off this surface by the stripper clip slot there, and I explained why. This hex rail is machined out of the same extrusion we use for the round rail. The cutter we use in here is a symmetrical, precise cutter. It fits this hex just right. Like I showed you in the last video, it is a nice snug fit on all 3 sides of the hex. If you have this ground down enough, when you're holding this base down, you can slide it right across this. If you have some clearance in there, you ground it a little too much, that's fine, don't worry about it. It should slide right over it without hitting anywhere on here. On the side where the 16-degree angle is, or on top. It should slide freely. You're going to line up the front, and I got the camera mounted so that you know what I'm talking about here. The front of the hex. You don't want to be in the chamber area. The base is going to line right up to the front of that. We're going to transfer some holes here. We're going to drill and tap 2 holes, 1032, the same pattern as ATI mounts. We're going to clean up and we're going to put those screws in, then we're going to come back and do our side hole the same way. We're going to transfer punch, automatic center punch, drill and tap, clean it up, and show you how it goes from there. Now I'm doing this in a simple makeshift setup, like I told you, because I want the average gun owner to be able to do this without paying a lot of money to have it done for them. Or if you want to hire a gunsmith, feel free. Either way, it saves the gunsmith time if you have him do it, so hopefully he'll charge you less to get a good mount. The main thing I want to make sure you understand about this is, as compared to the round receiver, this hex being machined perfectly in the center of this extrusion. These being pre-war, they were machined a lot better. I'm just assuming that this hex is machined center line to the bore all the way down. Yeah, I know you shouldn't assume things like that, but since, like I said, these were mostly made pre-war, they weren't wartime production. I think they took a lot more time. As you can tell just by looking at it, the machining's a lot better. We're going to find out though. We're going to get this mounted, and we're going to put a scope on it, and we're going to put a couple different lasers in it, and find out just how close we are from the scope's mechanical zero. Okay, what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the 3/16 transfer punch with the base lined up to the front of the hex, not in the chamber area. I'm going to transfer punch the first and second hole. Then I'm going to follow it up by a automatic centering punch to make the dimples bigger, to make it easier for the drill bit to start. Alright, the center punches are in with the transfer punch. Transfer punch, it's got a 90-degree point on it, and the wall thickness, the floor thickness on these bases is only about 100. It's a little shallow for these. These will work better if you take them on a grinder or a belt sander and make this a steeper angle, shallower angle, closer to a flat point. This is just a cheap Harbor Freight set of transfer punches, but just to let you know that point. Also, if you decide you want to do this in a drill or a mill, from the front of the hex back to the first hole is 1.1 inches. From that hole to the next one is 784.784. So 1.1, 1.884 if you want to do it that way. Like I said, I'm just doing this one the way most of you guys doing it at home would have to do. So I'm going to drill now with a 1/8 inch cobalt split point, followed by a 5/32 cobalt split point, and then I'm going to tap with a 3 flute starting 1032 tap. I'm going to clean it up. I'm going to install the top 2 screws, and then we're going to move to the side hole. I'm just using a cordless drill. It's a Craftsman. This has the little bubble level on the bottom of it, just to kind of help you guide. I'm not going to go through the whole drilling and tapping for you. I'm just showing you that I'm not using the mill or drill press, just a cordless drill and a makeshift setup here to hold the rifle. Alright, the holes are drilled. I'm starting to tap. I just thought I'd turn on the camera for a second here. Just, you know, you're easier if you have a drill press or a mill where you can come down on top of your tap holder, your tap handle with a tap guide. But if you eyeball it this way and this way, just take your time, go in a little bit, back out, a little bit, back out, and I mean like 1/8 of a turn and back out while you're keeping downward pressure. You'll get through this tapped hole fine. Just take a little longer. Take your time. Don't get in a hurry doing this part. Also, you can't see me. You should be wearing gloves if you're going to use cutting oil and stuff, but at least make sure you're wearing safety glasses, okay? Just wanted a few more seconds here on tapping. When you start this tap, you got to have a lot of downward pressure when you're cutting steel. When you get it started, you want to keep it perpendicular to the surface. If you have to push down on your hand, it's a little tricky. I understand a lot of you guys haven't done a lot of this kind of stuff, but holding on the center of this tap handle, push down and in, and keeping it straight both ways at the same time. You'll feel it start to cut. Once you feel it start to cut, you'll pretty much, using a 3-flute starting tap, it'll pretty much guide itself into that hole. Okay guys, the holes are tapped, and I just took a smooth file across the top, take those burrs off. You can come in here and deburr the inside of the chamber with, by the way, that's the tap I use. That's the one I had laying around. It's a 3-flute starting tap. It doesn't have to look like that. It doesn't have to have this relief back here. Just use a 3-flute. It'll grab and start easier when you're doing this by hand. 2 flutes, you have more of a chance of messing up. Anyway, the holes are tapped. They are in line. If you punch your holes and you drill and tap your holes and one hole's off a little bit, don't freak out. I didn't have to do that here, but I'm telling you, if you do, just open one of the holes up to the next size drill bit above 5/32, or both if you need to. It's not going to hurt the structural integrity or the mounting or anything. It's going to give you a little bit of room each way if you're just slightly off. The screw heads have a pretty big head on them, so you can do that either way. You're going to use Loctite 262. That's what I recommend. It's the best stuff out there I know of. I think it's called 263 now, and that's supposed to be even better, so that's what I recommend. Anyway, we're going to put the screws in here, move on to the side hole, and I'll be back. Okay guys, I put the 2 screws in on the top. That hex is seated real solid right now, seated to the hex on the receiver and the base. This is perpendicular. You want to make sure these screws are tight, not Loctited, just tightened down tight to hold the whole thing in place. There is no movement. It's a nice tight fit. It feels really good and solid right now. This is where we're going to add the 3rd screw. Now when you get in here, I didn't plan on making a hex receiver when I had this extrusion made, but you're going to find out inside this hole is not a 100% flat surface in there. It's more like 60-70%. That shouldn't be a problem because you have material at center line and past center line to get a hole started, and it should follow through fine, and your actual scope base is going to act as a guide. This hole's going to act as a guide for your drill bit. We're going to drill this one now, and shouldn't be a problem. Okay, I just transfer punched that using a 5/32 transfer punch. Measures 156, 155. I'm going to go ahead and drill this now with the 1/8 inch drill because there's not a full 100% flat surface in there. I'm going to drill it with the small drill first, the 1/8 inch, then I'm going to follow it by the 5/32 minor diameter for the tap. Okay, the hole is drilled 1/8 inch, then 5/32. Now I'm tapping it, notice with the guide on. If you don't see this video, for a few of you guys that bought one of these hex already, I'm going to change the instructions for this because there's not a full flat surface area. We're just going to use the base, the scope base, as the guide to drill and tap. Then we're going to pull this off, this base, and drill a 3/16 hole through the base only, the aluminum base only. Okay, the side hole's tapped, drilled and tapped. The fact that there wasn't a 100% flat surface didn't make any difference because we used the scope base as the guide. Now I'm going to drill this hole out to 3/16 so it clears the threads on the bolt. Not this hole, just the aluminum. And then we're going to use Loctite 262 and mount it up the base. Okay, I took the receiver before I mounted this base and I sprayed it out really good up inside the chamber area, the whole receiver area, with carburetor cleaner. If you don't want to use that, something that toxic, use something milder, alcohol or hot soap, water, whatever you want to use. Make sure it's dry real good. to me, it's fast and it's evaporates almost instantly. And then obviously I'm going to do a full standard clean on this bore and receiver before I fire it. But the two top screws are in, the side screws in, everything went in fine. They're all Loctited and completely solid as can be. It guides itself on. Again, like the round, this is basically using the whole base as your jig for drilling and tapping. Only this is better because of the hex. We're not going to use the round guide tool like we did to the rear sight for the round receiver. Anyway, let's put the rail on. Again, I'm using 262 Loctite, 263 if you can't find that. I'm putting just one drop on these little 440 screws. Insert them in the hole. Screw them in. Not tight. Wait until you get the other two on the other side. The same way with Loctite. Then we're going to tighten them all up. Okay, I forgot to mention, it's not totally necessary, but when you're installing these screws, hold this base down. You'll get it lined up to the holes in the base, the rail into the base. Hold the front part down when you start to snug these up. Just get them snug, then go back and tighten every one of them. Wipe off your excess Loctite, and this installation is done. Okay, here's the mount back in the original stock. It's not going to stay in that stock though, but it looks good. It's extremely solid. This is my first hex mount, and that does have a Max Shepherd bolt head on this one. It's also going to get a 10mm trigger. There was no bolt protrusion. I can show you that. You know, I can't show you up in the chamber very well, but the two screws on tap do not protrude. There is some protrusion on the side screw. Okay, I'm wrong. Like I said, this is my first hex. So these screws that you get on the side for the side mount is like you're going to have to put them in a cordless drill or something against your grinder or belt sander and take off 3 or 4 threads max, and then reinstall that screw. Other than that, everything's fine. This is completely solid. Should be centered up really nice, and I'll let you know how that goes in the next section of this video. Alright guys, I took that side screw and I put it in a cordless drill and put it against the grinder, and it's not even close to protruding now. The thread length measures about 410, so I'm going to fix that problem and order 7/16 long screws for that side on these hex motors. Anyway, everything looks nice and solid, and we'll get back here in a minute to the rest of the video. One last thing I did want to mention to you guys, with these standard wood stocks here, factory stocks, it's real close. It clears on this side, I'm actually almost touching. So like I said, this is my first hex with this mount, first mount made for a hex. You may have to just take a tiny bit off of each side, because I'm sure these wood stocks are going to vary. So before you do any of the mounting, put it all the way, hold it all the way down the base, and make sure you don't have to relieve the wood just a tiny bit on each side. Okay, here's the finished hex Mosin with the Trueshot see-through scope mount, and Archangel stock, of course. It's just too nice of a stock. I had to go ahead and use one, I guess. It's got a 10mm trigger, got a Max Shepherd bolt handle. If you didn't see the other video, I recommend the Max Shepherd bolt handle. It clears the scope mount really well. I hope you got enough light here. If you have an ATI already, you can grind the top of your ATI bolt handle flush with this surface of the bolt. Completely flush with this surface of the bolt. And I recommend adding a second screw where the nub was, but if you have an ATI you can use it. There's other companies that make bolt handles out there. I'm happy with Max Shepard's product. It does need to be a low profile. Anyway, the scope mount's on, it's solid. And I wish I could show you a view. I'm going to try to get you a view through the see-through. We changed the configuration a little bit on that hole. It's more of a square now with a little radius on the top. It gives you capability to use your... I can't tell if you can see the sight post through my video camera here, but you can see it. The new squarish hole with the radius right on top, it allows you to use this rear sight at the 300-yard setting. Most of you guys are going to shoot, I'm assuming, I don't know, 300 or less with your open sights. So scope on it and see how it looks. And there it is with scope. Plenty of eye relief. That's a 6x24 BSA contender. Same as the test rifle. Actually, it's the same scope. I got another one for this one though. And looking forward to see how nice this one shoots. It's got a really nice bore. Same setup as a round receiver, except for it's a hex. If you have any questions, call me or email me. Trueshot Technologies customer service email is on every page, and the phone number's on there. So you now have a see-through mount available for the hex model like several people requested. I've already sent a couple of these out yesterday. Today's the 7th of February 2014. You guys gonna have to shorten that side screw. I just ordered some screws that are right length, but you can find them at a hardware store. You need 1032 by 7/16 thread length. Every other kit from now on will come out with that right screw, so you don't have to grind any screws down. I don't like that. But that's not what I'm about. Sending out parts that have to have stuff ground on them. Although you do have to grind the receiver. Don't forget that high spot there. Nothing I could do about that. Anyway, little grinding never hurt anybody, I guess. Hope you guys like it. It's got see-through capability. It's a solid scope mount. Obviously this hasn't been tested yet, but I'm fully confident that it's going to turn out just fine. Thanks for watching the video. TrueshotTechnologies.com. Stay safe.